Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I've called you Mayor. I'll call you Mr. Secretary today. Thank you for being with us, taking a few minutes. Your 4 years coming to a close right now. About what are you proudest as the Transportation Secretary?
Probably the jobs and livelihoods that we've created. It's one of the reasons I wanted to be at this facility with electrical apprentices. The change from when I became mayor, almost 15 years ago, double-digit unemployment, and folks scrambling to try to find work. And now we're scrambling to try to find workers because we've got all of these good-paying, skilled jobs. And so much of that is related to the industrial strategy that's led to things like the GM facility and Amazon around here and Kokomo, the battery plants. But of course also the infrastructure bill that I've had the honor of being in the middle of, making sure that as we build these roads and bridges and airports and train tunnels and everything, that we're creating good-paying jobs as we go. So if I had to choose one thing, it's a lot we've done from consumer protection to safety regulations, but the job creation has been incredible.
During your tour of this facility, the person who was taking you on the tour had mentioned about the electric vehicle batteries and the technology that will go into it and the need for the workers to go into that. Is that one of the biggest challenges facing the current administration, the next administration, and future administrations, building that network to make those vehicles much more sustainable and more viable for people?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the biggest change to happen to the automotive sector in 100 years. And we've got to make sure that America is on the leading edge of it. Anybody who grew up around here in the shadow of the old Studebaker factories knows what it looks like if you don't maintain that edge. And obviously China wants to lead the EV market, not because they're big environmentalists, but just because they understand the strategic power of that. We've got to make sure America wins. That means making sure the chargers are there, making sure we have the skills to build the batteries, making sure we source the raw materials that we need, ideally domestically or at least from friendly countries. All of that, we've made enormous progress in the last 4 years, but there's a long way to go. And I really hope ideology does not get in the way, because it's so important not to pull the rug out from under the workers who are doing such a great job, both building these facilities and increasingly working in them.
Taking the ideology out of it, realistically speaking, based upon where we are, where we have been, and the trajectory forward, how close are we to getting to the point where we have that network that will sustain the likelihood that more people will turn towards electric vehicles versus non?
Well, our goal has been to get to about 50-50 by the end of this decade, about half of all new car sales by 2030. And to do that, we also need about 500,000 chargers around the country by the end of this decade. So far, the number of chargers has roughly doubled. It's gone to about 200,000 since the administration arrived. The next big thing is the federally funded chargers for the places where it's not yet profitable for the private sector to do that. That is getting up and running. It's on track, but it's not going to happen overnight. I do think we'll be there by our 2030 goal.
Is that the next big challenge for any administration in the future? And not just electric vehicles, but any challenge? What's the biggest issue?
I think there's going to be a lot of challenges related to the delivery of these projects. It's one thing to get the funding out the door, and that might have been the biggest hurdle, but actually implementing them. One thing I know very well from my days as mayor, that's no simple thing, even when you got the funding lined up. Now that's down to thousands of different cities and transit authorities and states. But the federal government needs to work with them in order to make sure that they succeed. And I do think that's going to be a major challenge. There's a lot of challenges related to technology too. You got drones entering the airspace, automated vehicles starting to get on the roads. That's going to require both safety and economic thinking that will challenge a lot of our assumptions that we've lived with our whole lives.
One of the last times I talked to you, we were mentioning the possibility of the South Shore Line maybe moving towards downtown South Bend. The city has now purchased Union Station, and with the goal of turning that into the new Amtrak hub. Anything come across your desk recently related to this specific area that leads us to believe that we're moving in that direction?
Well, certainly I was delighted to see the double tracking on the South Shore. I'll be riding it myself today to get to Chicago. That was something that was a dream for a long time. The next thing is to maybe have a shorter connection into the airport. I was pleased to see South Shore reach an agreement that's going to help move that along. And I do think for the long run, South Bend deserves to have good passenger connectivity downtown. Clearly, a lot of things will still need to happen in order for that to be a possibility, but I'll do whatever I can, especially, federally I can only do so much unless there's a grant that comes before the department, but as a private citizen, in the future, I'll continue to care about that.
I'd like to ask you a couple of political questions, if you might, before we wrap up here. First of all, I wanted to ask you about the President Biden pardon towards Hunter and the ramifications of that. not just the fact that a father pardoned his son, but the statement that the president made about the political prosecution and persecution of Hunter Biden. Some would say that played into the hands of the Republicans who said that's what's been going on with Donald Trump for the last 4 to 6 years, for example. What's your reaction?
You know, I really have to defer to the President of the White House and the Department of Justice on that. Law enforcement is just not part of what I'm qualified to speak on as long as I'm wearing this suit.
Okay. Next question about it, and this is a political question. The Democratic Party is facing some struggles getting people like who are in this building, blue-collar, middle-class people. They tended to lose a lot of those voters in the last election. What is it going to take for the Democratic Party to come back and regain their trust?
Well, again, I got to take care not to talk about parties and campaigns while I'm in this capacity. But what I will say is that I think it will become more and more clear through time that this administration has delivered. Things that were promised and not delivered for years, including by the previous Trump administration, are finally actually happening. Now, just because you do something good doesn't mean you always get the credit for it, but I will be there not just for the remaining weeks I'm in this job, but for the rest of my life. I will be there working to remind people when these ribbon cuttings happen, when these factories open, when these facilities get completed, that some people were with us when we came together to get that package through. And some people weren't.
A couple of wrap-up questions for you. You recently moved, not that recently, to Traverse City, Michigan, away from South Bend. And there's some speculation that with Gretchen Whitmer's term coming up in 2026, that perhaps you might be eyeing the possibility of running for Michigan governor. What do you say?
I haven't made any decisions about my future, except that I'm going to be spending a lot more time with Chasten and the kids. There's lots of possibilities. People have lots of ideas that they're approaching me with, but we've got a few more weeks where I've got to deliver in this job for President Biden and the American people.
So
and
you don't have
see.
anything specifically next for Pete Buttigieg?
Nothing ruled in or out right now.
Okay. And how are Chasten and the kids?
They're great. They're thriving. It's crazy to think the kids weren't even on the scene when I got this job, and now they're 3 years old. They loved Halloween. They're making their list for Santa, and just experienced their first snowball fight over the weekend. We had a big lake effect weekend up in Traverse City. They're doing great, and they really, Chasten continues to have a lot of attachment to South Bend, and I can't wait to introduce the kids to South Bend. I'm not sure when yet. I've gotten them started on Notre Dame football. We'll see what the occasion is.
Step
to bring
one.
them back.
Step one.
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the WSBT 22 YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the WSBT 22 YouTube channel.